Hey Dio, this is the Armchair Critic, back with another Disembodied commentary, and this time we're going to be delving into the cape and cowl of the Dark Knight and talk about Tim Burton's Batman. If you got your DVD handy and you want to watch the movie with me, it's not absolutely necessary. Just find the point where you see the Warner Brothers logo, and you can follow along with me while you're watching the movie, beginning now. I remember the first time I saw this, and I saw this concrete structure. I tried to figure out what it was. I thought it was the top of a building, or maybe we were going into some kind of underground tunnel. And because it is very kind of mysterious, I thought maybe we were going into the Batcave or something. Big logo, Batman. I noticed the three principals, Jack Nicholson, Michael Keaton, and Kim Basinger, come before the title. That's interesting. And the score, of course, is by, that's the first thing you notice here is the score. It's from Danny Elfman, and it would become the long-standing anthem of Batman. It was the music for the opening of the animated series, and it stayed with the movie series all the way up through Batman and Robin. It's still around. We remember it. It's very specific. It's a march. It's to me, it's as good as Star Wars or Indiana Jones. It's as good as any of that stuff, or Jaws. And we remember it. As much as I love the Christopher Nolan films, Hans Zimmer's score, I don't even remember it, to be honest. It doesn't pop like this. I think this music announces with a fanfare that we're moving away from the guitar strumming of the TV show. We're past that and we're moving into modern times. And the concrete structure takes on a more familiar shape, and I have to admit I was a little disappointed that all this was the Batman emblem. Where exactly is this? Gotham City. This cityscape reminds me a lot of Metropolis. It's very oppressive. And we see that Gotham City is basically a sewer of drug addicts and prostitutes. Now the opening is interesting because it's a bit of misdirection. We see this couple and their son who can't catch a cab, and they're also a bit naive. Obviously haven't been in Gotham City long. So like anyone who is naive in a city like this, they cross the street into the slums. I think we're meant to it's a bit of misdirection because I think we're meant to think that this is Thomas and Martha Wayne and Bruce, and we're like, oh, this is Batman's origin story. We're going to see the murders of the Waynes and how Bruce grew up to be Batman. There was we passed it, but there was a lady or prostitute wearing red. I thought that was an interesting choice, because it's like she's in this gray, kind of colorless environment. She's wearing this red shawl. She's the only bit of bright color in this slum. It's like, of course they get robbed. The only bit of color in this slum, and it's like the crime in this city shines like a beacon, like that red shawl. and we get a very cartoony Batman. That was a bad effect. But of course, those people were not Thomas and Martha Wayne. They were just ordinary people who were getting robbed, telling us that Bruce's story is not all that unusual, in this environment at least. Johnny Gobbs. I wonder if Johnny Gobbs is a recurring character. I don't know. We're kind of tricked into thinking that this is sometime in the past, that the people are, but based on the clothes that the people are wearing. It looks like 1949, but the cars are all modern. I think it's meant to get our attention. You know, we're not going to see an origin story. We're going to be dropped full tilt into the world of the Cape Crusader as it happens right now. And that misdirection lets us know that this is not going to be what we expect. Now that's an entrance. That approach is refreshing because for me personally, I get tired of origin stories. I love Bruce's story, but I've seen it over and over again. It looks like Dracula. So, I mean, this movie tries to deal with Batman on the job without the drudgery of trotting out the same ground we've been over a dozen times. I think this scene really cleared up a lot of people's fears that this was going to be kind of a jokey, campy retread of the old TV show. I'm Batman. You don't need to say much more than that. And there was some talk about Adam West being in this movie. There were some rumors about him being in this movie, and this being an adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns, which was about an older Batman. Personally, I think that would have been a mistake. Now here's something that breaks my heart. It's obvious that what's being set up in this press conference, or this benefit here, is that Billy D. Williams, who's playing Harvey Dent, was being set up to play Two-Face. That may have been... They may have been pointing in that direction, but it never happened. I think the failure of Batman Returns killed a lot of Burton's potential plans for the series. Mayor Borg, that's interesting. And Bruce is not here. He's got a place card sitting next to Commissioner Gordon, right there. And that's interesting, because it's like these guys are talking about crime and talking about crime and talking about crime, but Bruce is actually doing something about it. And now we meet Jack Napier, who will, of course, become the Joker. I think people were over the moon, I know I was, when they heard that Jack Nicholson was going to play the Joker. It just seems to fit his personality. And actually, I remember at the time, I was saying that my choice would have been Tim Curry. But 25 years later, I'm glad they went with Jack. It's such a monumental performance. I like that he refers to somebody as this clown. Even if you couldn't believe that Jack Nicholson could play the Joker, you can't help but believe he could play a gangster. What's surprising is that he's not the guy in charge. Yet. His approach to Alicia is interesting. He's making time with the boss's girlfriend. But he seems to approach her not with any kind of love or affection. You wouldn't expect that from Jack. She's just kind of a toy. Alicia, of course, is played by Jerry Hall. Now, what's set up in this scene with investigation, again, is that Gotham City is a sewer of crime, but we also see where it comes from. The criminal element and the corruption goes all the way up to the police department. The actor playing Eckhart is William Hootkins. He's passed on now, but he was in Star Wars. He played Porkins. He was in Raiders of the Lost Ark. He was one of the army guys, or the army officials who gives Indy the job. He had the last line in the movie, remember? Top men. What's wrong with his voice here? It seems like it's been dubbed over. You're full of shit, Knox. That line actually surprised me, because I didn't think there was a... You never, at the time, you never thought about bad language in a Batman movie. There's one of the most famous lines that was in all of the trailers. Lieutenant, is there a 6-foot bat in Gotham City? It's a great line. Notice we don't spend a lot of time with Batman at the beginning of this movie. I mean, we saw him in the flesh, so to speak, in the earlier scenes, but then he kind of remains hidden in the shadows. They give you a little taste, and then they hold him back. Kind of give you an idea of the reason that this city needs Batman. Eckhart's in bed with the mob, the local mob. And you just look at this guy and you know he's not longed for this world. There's a lot of stuff in this movie that gets a callback. There are a lot of lines of dialogue that pay off later, both big and small. He's got a line here: where you been spending your nights? Gotham City looks like a gas works. And speaking of gas works, we see how mishandled the political structure is in this city. The city is run by the mob. The streets look like Dante's Inferno, but they want to have this big party despite the fact that they're in debt. I'd say it looks like total fantasy, but read the news sometime. This is the Ed Koch mayor. It's like this actor looks so much like Ed Koch, the former mayor of New York. I don't know if that's a comment on anything, but back to Knox. And by the way, you'll notice the drawing that the cartoon gives Knox is signed by Bob Kane, who created Batman. I was surprised that Knox said, "What a dick." When I saw this movie in the theater, I thought it was a kid's movie. And here we have Academy Award winner Kim Basinger. She won her Oscars a few years later for LA Confidential. A photojournalist. And she mentions the Cordo Maltese. This exists in the DCU. In The Dark Knight Returns, it's a small island in South America where there was a government uprising, and the United States got involved as it supported the government, while the Soviets supported the rebellion, which the president tries to settle by sending in Superman. The problem is their rebels got nervous and set up a nuclear warhead. Corto Maltese is also where LexCorp has a lot of its labs located. LexCorp owned by, of course, Lex Luthor. didn't read The Dark Knight Returns until long after this movie, so I was excited that the movie connects with the DCU in that way. Gives the movie a wider scope so you don't feel like this is just some knockoff. Or one-off. And here we have another Oscar winner, Jack Palance. Won his Oscar for City Slickers. But he'd been in more than 100 films. I love the production design of this movie. It was done by Peter Young and the late Anton Furst. Peter Young was the production designer on the first 3 Superman pictures, and Supergirl, and later Sleepy Hollow and Troy and Stardust, and a lot of other stuff. Their work in this film got the film its only Oscar, sadly. The designs are based on German Expressionist films of the early days of cinema. Films like Fritz Lang and F.W. Murnau and Erich von Stroheim. The designs are very angular. They're very cold. They don't look inviting. They look impressive. Excuse me. Jack held up the Joker card. That was kind of obvious. I guess the cold designs of The Office are supposed to play off of what is happening here with the gangsters. Grissom knows that Jack's been playing around with his girlfriend, so he sets him up. There's no honor among thieves. These are 2 great actors. I know reportedly Jack Palance got a little testy with Tim Burton, who was relatively new. Jack Palance was hard of hearing, and at one point Tim Burton called for the scene to start. Grissom didn't move, or Jack Palance didn't move. Palance got testy, and he said, "I've made 100 films. How many have you made?" Over a woman. That's what Jack says later. Over a woman. Now, not to be condescending, but some of you may not have even been born when this movie came out. So, to really understand what the movie you're looking at, you have to understand the times. This movie came out in the summer of 1989. Or let me put it another way. This movie was the summer of 1989. This was the biggest thing in the movie since Star Wars. That year, you couldn't go 5 feet without somebody trying to sell you something with Batman on it. This movie was huge. I mean, mega huge. You think of how crazy people went when the Avengers came out? This was double that. And I think all that zeal came from the fact that we didn't have anything like this. Hollywood generally, at the time, ran screaming from superhero movies. And that was thanks largely to the downfall of the Superman series. Which, after the first 2 movies, which were great, the Salkinds, the father and son Salkind, Alexander and Ilya, got a hold of the franchise and took it away from Richard Donner, and ran it into the ground with Superman 3, and then Supergirl. So confidence in the genre was at an all-time low. I mean, the most recent superhero had been Superman 4, and all Marvel had was those crappy Hulk movies on television. So this movie was a giant leap forward. Not to mention it was a risk, too. I mean, Jack Nicholson as a Joker made sense, but when people heard that Michael Keaton was getting the title role, they were all just kind of like, "Really? Mr. Mom?" So it's hard to remember now, but at this point, Michael Keaton was a comedian. He was that goofy guy who played the best friend. I think at this point, he was looking for something more from his career. The year before, he had been in 2 films that were radically different. He was in Beetlejuice for Tim Burton, and he also tried to get serious with a movie called Clean and Sober, where he plays a drug addict. It's a really, really good film. But even with that, nobody thought this could work. Warner Brothers got bags and bags of complaint letters. I mean, if you thought that people moaned and groaned over Ben Affleck, you should have heard the outcry over Michael Keaton. And just as a general point of trivia, Michael Keaton's real name is Michael Douglas. I'll give you one guess why he changed it. Here's something interesting. Is up to this point, there's been very little action. It's all been exposition. Over the weekend, I saw Age of Ultron, and that movie opens with the team storming the fortress of Baron von Strucker. This movie opens with an action scene, but then retreats into building up tension within the setting, within the characters. We hear about Batman, we meet the criminal element, we see the political structure, we see that the political structure is basically useless. It's all in an effort to help us understand why the city needs Batman. These are desperate times that call for desperate measures. And Batman is definitely a desperate measure. Now here's one issue that I have. This room, where he keeps all these suits of armor, which I guess is supposed to be symbolic of his night job. My problem here is that this particular Bruce Wayne, doesn't seem to fit this type of stuff. You look at Michael Keaton, and you wouldn't think he'd be interested in all this. Excuse me. One of the great qualities of Michael Keaton, and what endures him to the public, is that he doesn't seem like a stuffy actor. He seems like just a guy. The kind of guy you'd like to have a beer with and watch the Cubs game. He doesn't seem fit for this fancy stuff. I've heard it said that he makes a better Batman than he does a Bruce Wayne, and I think that's true. Now, this may be a controversial statement, but I've said the opposite of George Clooney. I think he made a great Bruce Wayne, but a lousy Batman. But then, of course, that could have been just because it was a lousy movie. I'd love to have seen Clooney play Batman in a better movie, though. But either way, it's not that Keaton's not suited for this part. It's just that he doesn't seem suited for this setting. I really like Robert Wall in this movie. He's kind of our center, he's kind of the ordinariness in an unordinary set of circumstances. I like Alfred. I think perhaps this way, so. Go out the back door, quote unquote. Give Knox a grant. Why are the rates so odd? Because they can afford to be. They're calling Bruce Wayne. Gah! Data technology. I know it's the 80s, but this technology in his back room just looks so dated now. And you sort of associate Batman with state of the art. Nowadays, you just pull up a cell phone. I never cared much for this Commissioner Gordon. Doesn't seem to be a person; it just seems to be a stand-in. Although I love Pat Hingle, but there doesn't seem to be much of a character there. See, again, everything looks like the 1940s. Why does Eckhart look like he has malaria? See, again, like I say, everything looks like the 1940s. The hats, the pinstripe suits. And of course, seeing the technology and the automobiles, we know it's the present time, but that contrast seems to set the movie out of time as they're breaking into this safe. what time period is this? It's like we're looking at an old gangster movie. You just can't have a Batman movie without, a lot of old-time gangsters. It reminds you of the period that he came out of. I may have missed it, but I'm not really sure what they were looking for. Yeah, so you can't have a Batman movie without sickly green chemicals. It's just part of the landscape. Police are basically useless here. Again, I like Pat Hingle, but he just doesn't seem like Commissioner Gordon. Like, of course, after seeing Gary Oldman, who gave him a more human dimension, this Commissioner Gordon seems like just kind of a, I don't want to say a cliche, but not much character, I'll just say that. These levers and gears, this set design, as Jack is destroying all of this stuff for some reason, it reminds me a lot of Fritz Lang's Metropolis. And finally we get back to Batman. And I think the movie has earned it. We've spent all of our time so far getting set up, and finally we get a payoff. Last time in my Spider-Man commentary, I mentioned that research laboratories and comic books were made of fail. I would say the same about chemical factories. It's just the same thing. Disaster is not a probability. It's an inevitability written in stone by the hand of God. Chemical factories don't breed better living. They breed monsters. But to be fair, it's more fun that way. See, I draw comparisons to Metropolis with the set design, but I like the over-design, oppressive, kind of closed-in. This factory, it's overdeveloped, and almost the metal looks like it's going to swallow you up. See, there's the door, and all he has to do is run for it, the exit. It's like Jack can get out of this very easily. But then the bat. I guess his ego got in the way, I don't know. I don't know if you can see it in this scene, but the emblem on Batman's chest has feet. Normally the part at the bottom of the emblem tapers to a point, but there are 2 extra points on it. I like Jack's response to this. This is kind of a shock, and then he puts him down and he kind of settles into it. Nice outfit. He's like, I've seen weirder in this city, See, again, why doesn't he just leave? Think about the future, There were about 20 opportunities for him to get out of this factory, and he just... And then this. He did not fall over that railing, he jumped. This is interesting. This look that Batman gives him is kind of strange. It's like, what was with that look? And Jack has all of these scars on his face. His face has been injured by the bullet ricocheted. But it's not on his face when he comes back as his Joker. It's not scarred up like that. But that look that Batman gave him before he fell, it was almost like recognition or something. I know we're saving that plot point for later, but that was just very strange. I love that image where he's standing in front of that big sign. All of Jack's cards. And apparently green chemicals paint your nails. Now, one of the important things to note about Batman is that he has a lot of realities. There are different versions of Batman, so it's important to know which reality you're in. There's the world of the 60s TV show. There's the world of the Tim Burton Batman. There's the world of Joel Schumacher's Batman. There's the world of Christopher Nolan's Batman. And there's the one in the comic books. And the one in the animated series. And then, of course, there'll be one with the Zack Snyder Batman. They all tell the story of Batman differently, but the core is the same. Each one is a little bit different. And they get the story just a little bit different. This is a very Burton-esque dining room. Now, I said earlier that I didn't think Bruce was fit for this setting. He's too down-to-earth for this kind of fancy-schmancy kind of place. But I'd forgotten that they actually acknowledged that. Still, why would he put a guest in here? Seems like he's doing this just because it's what he heard rich people are supposed to do. It's a very Citizen Kane kind of table. See, there's a joke here where he says, "I don't think I've ever been in this room." But it's like this is a whole scene built around this joke. It seems like kind of a waste. I guess he's trying to get her comfortable with him. That just seems kind of strange. That's a long way to go for one joke. Now, see, chops and pasta. That seems more this Bruce Wayne speed. Personally, I like the relationship between Bruce and Alfred a lot more in the Christopher Nolan pictures. There it's more of a mentor, kind of a guiding force, but here he seems less involved. Actually, this Alfred is more involved in his love life than he is in his life as Batman. Is a scene earlier where he tells Bruce about Gordon, but he seems more like a servant than an important fixture in Bruce's life. Alfred's always been more than just a butler. And by the way, this Alfred is played by Michael Gough, who early in his career, this is a point of trivia, played a kidnapped scientist in a movie called Top Secret, which starred Val Kilmer, who would later go on to be Batman. And to be honest, I never really bought this romance either. Kim Basinger is a good actress, but I've never seen her as the lovey-dovey type. She always seems a little cold and distant for romance around her screen presence. She won the Oscar for LA Confidential, where she plays a damaged woman who falls in love with Russell Crowe. Or Guy Pearce. That seemed a little more genuine. Of course, this isn't LA Confidential. And this is a pretty famous scene with this underground doctor who reveals Joker's face for the first time. I like that they don't reveal his face right away. I remember this was parodied in an episode of The Simpsons. When Lisa got braces and they didn't have any insurance, so they gave him they gave her like a headgear that predated stainless steel. So it was just like this. I'm always a little surprised the Joker didn't kill this doctor. It's kind of one of those movie staples in the 80s when, you have a doctor like this, they usually gets killed. Some nasty looking tools. Looks like he got him out of the kitchen. Yeah, see, I like that they don't reveal his face right away. And here's another staple of the 80s. When two people have a first date, they absolutely have to sleep together. I guess they figured it worked, and I guess they figured they did it in Superman 2, so why not in Batman? And here's a question I have. Is she using him? She's a journalist. I mean, is she doing all of this is she doing all this just to get information out of him? I know they're trying to build a romance, but the feeling is just a little strange. And here we are back in Grissom's office. And this is the first time that we, at least in the movie itself, get to see Joker's makeup. That is a great entrance. It's me, Sugar Bumps. Now, if you were around when this movie came out, the advertisements were not shy about showing this reveal. It was in every trailer, it was in every TV spot, it was in every commercial. I think this scene will be on Jack Nicholson's obituary reel. It's a great reveal. But how does a person coming to this movie see this scene completely fresh? What does it look like if you haven't seen this 1,000 times before? Been dead once already. It's very liberating. Think of it as a kind of a therapy. So you can already see him there in the dark, the big rictus grin. That is a great entrance. He may have a better entrance than Batman. Jack Nicholson barely has a line in this movie you can't quote. I mean, it's no wonder he was being tossed around as a possible Oscar nominee. I wish the Academy had broadened its mind a little bit. If you watch Tim Burton's work, then you know he always prefers his oddballs. He's a lot like Milos Forman, in that he sheds a lot of light on his misfit characters. And here we cut back and forth between Joker and The Morning After with Bruce and Vicky Vale. It's like I never can figure out what exactly he's thinking there. This moment feels like a producer's suggestion or producer's addition, where she wakes up and he's hanging upside down. That's very obvious. I thought it would have been really funny if she woke up and he was facing her and he had his arms folded and he was glaring at her and she woke up saying, "Gah!" We cut between this hideous sight where he's committed a murder, and then this quiet, sort of serene setting at Wayne Manor. Oop. And just by contrast, these two aren't that interesting. But like I said, I never really bought this relationship anyway. I think you need that intercut between the Joker to break up the monotony, because this stuff's just not that interesting. See, I mean, this is part of Burton's writing style. Or, well, he didn't write this movie, but it's part of his style anyway. He gives all the best stuff to his misfits, but the normal people get stuck with this kind of perfunctory dialogue. And you're left to wonder if she's using him to get information, but it never really pays off. She's in a hurry to get out of there. And she just figures out that he lied to her, and it's like, are they using each other? Again, it doesn't pay off. And Alicia again. That's a very sitcom feint. I don't normally like to talk about actors' salaries, but I think it's relevant here. Nicholson got paid, I think, around $6 million for this role, and that's worth noting because he gives a multi-million-dollar performance, maybe more. He got that much plus a percentage of the gross. And also something to note, that this is the first and only time, as far as I know, now you may correct me in the comments, but this is the first and only time that I know of that Jack Napier, the Joker, is actually given an origin story. None of the other movies did that. I like the way it's done here, but I also like the way it's done in The Dark Knight. Here we understand what happened with the chemicals and all that, but I also like the idea that the Joker just kind of comes out of nowhere, without a name and really with no purpose. As much as I love Nicholson and all of his one-liners, but I think Heath Ledger still has the best one-liner. Do I really look like a guy with a plan? Not to take anything away from this performance, but I think it speaks better of the nature of the character that he just kind of comes in out of nowhere. That corpse is unnerving. Now, here, when he wipes his forehead, it's a reversed effect. We're made to believe that he's taking makeup off, but Nicholson is actually putting white makeup on. It's a very simple reverse effect. I like it. It's odd that Joker has guys in leather working for him. In most incarnations of Batman, his goons are dressed like clowns. And again, there are very few lines that he has that aren't quotable. He does his impression of Grisham here. You are my number one guy. Sorry, I just Now this scene where he's talking to Rotelli's corpse, this was the first scene that I ever saw from the movie. I think Burton was on 60 Minutes or something at the time, talking about the movie, and he mentioned something about there not being a Robin. And I was only half listening. And they cut back to this, So I assumed that this corpse was Robin. I thought, this movie's gonna be hardcore. This is not gonna be the TV show. Not by a long shot. They kind of leave us alone with this corpse for a couple of seconds. That's creepy. Now here's something that bothers me. She's digging around for information about Bruce, but again, the mixed signal just gets in the way. A lot of kids went to see this movie, and it's like, what signal are they getting? I guess, did she sleep with him for information? It's not a good message. I could be reading it wrong, I don't know. But either way, she follows him around to see what he's up to. He's kind of dark and mysterious, even though he hasn't really been dark and mysterious before on their date, except for the hanging upside down thing. I wondered why he's not driving one of his fancy cars, and then suddenly realized that he's heading into the slums. She finds Bruce to be a blind alley, and here he's headed down blind alleys. Now Bruce goes to the front of this hotel called Hotel to lay flowers, presumably where his mother and father were killed. And the question is, of course, why is he at the scene of the murder? Why is he not at the cemetery? What I've come up with is this is part of what fuels his motivation. It's more important that he sees his parents' murder as unfinished, i.e., they're dead but they are not at rest. That fuels Bruce's psyche to go out dressed in a rubber suit and be criminals till bloody pulp night after night. So it's kind of unspoken motivation. We're asked to meet the movie halfway on this. I like that it's not spelled out. If you listen to my commentary last time on Spider-Man, I said for everything about it that I liked, there's something I didn't like, and that's true of this movie. Even though I like this movie a lot more than Spider-Man. Now, if you weren't around in the summer of '89, it may be hard to understand how big this movie was. As I said before, think Avengers and double that. But this movie was much more important than just a vehicle to make money. It was a turning point for this character. This was the movie that broke away from the TV series and took Batman back to his film noir roots. You can see that in the production design here. We're about to have a clown attack. What happened to Batman between the 60s TV series and Tim Burton's movie that made this possible was a man named Frank Miller. In 1986, he put together a story arc called The Dark Knight Returns, which was intended, according to Miller, to, quote, give Batman his balls back. What came of that was a revision of the character that has stayed with us, rather. And the revision, and it's part of the revision that we're currently watching. Now, the 60s TV series was fun. I mean, Adam West called it The Light Night. But it resulted in a bad time because all through the 70s and early 80s, Batman was, in the public's mind, a walking joke. But what came out of Miller's work was a much darker and much more serious anti-hero. time to pay the check. But it was a much more serious anti-hero, guy who gets down in the grime and the filth with the criminals in order to do what the cops can't do. Batman does his job out of internal drive, damaged psychology, sort of looking for redemption. It's an errand driven by the need to cleanse himself of his own sins and his own demons. That is what separates him from Superman. We don't really identify as much with Superman, although I do like Superman. But he's not relatable. Superman is an alien. Batman is all too human. And he has no superpowers. Superman is the fantasy of who we would like to be. Batman is the truth of who we really are. You know, we want to beat up criminals and give them a taste of their own medicine. And the one thing I admire about this Batman is that Batman is all alone. There's no Robin, there's no Batgirl. He's just a shadowy figure whose job is to scare the daylights out of Gotham's criminal element. I mean, it's right there in the opening scene when he tells the guy, I want you to tell all your friends about me. You know, that's Batman. Or at least the Batman from my generation. The Hugh Hefner image that Adam West had hanging out in his pad with a smoking jacket, that was a symbol of the times but not of the character. It's a version but not a dependable one. Or a definitive one. And I think each one sets the course for the character based on the times. This movie set Batman on a course for modern times. Again, this movie's much better at portraying Batman than it is Bruce Wayne. This scene where he talks to Alfred, I have a feeling he was just bored by this stuff. It's just dull and uninteresting. Alfred here, strangely enough, is more like Bruce's mother. He's trying to get him to give up the cape and cowl and get married and settle down because he's worried about him. But what I liked about the Michael Caine version of Alfred was that he understands the need for both, but he especially understands the need for Batman. I complained in the Spider-Man commentary that the relationships were just underwhelming. I have the same problem here. You know, the relationship between Vicky and Bruce is dull. The relationship between Alfred and Bruce is dull. The only two people that connect really in this movie for me are Vicky Vale and Alexander Knox. They have an interesting chemistry, which of course comes a lot of which comes from Robert Wuhl's personality. I bring this up all the time, and people are like, "Well, it's just a superhero movie." You know, nobody goes to a superhero movie to see relationships. And I'll argue against this till the day I die. But the best action movies are the ones where we have relationships that we care about. That picture on Joker's desk looked like Bill Paxton. I've looked up his filmography online to see if it's him. I couldn't find anything. I'm not 100% on what Joker's doing here. He's cutting up pictures. And by the way, that picture of Knox, that's a glamour shot. That's not a photograph. That's a glamour shot. I like how Beautiful Dreamer kind of sneaks in on the soundtrack here. Jesus Marimba. I like that line. It's an old saying. It's kind of an exclamation of surprise. There are at least 24 things that Joker says in this movie that you have to research to find out. It's just weird. He's cutting up these pictures. I'm of a mind to make some mookie. I looked it up in the Urban Dictionary, and mookie is defined as, and I quote, a crazy yet lovable girl who is a social misfit. She will always follow her heart. Mookie will always be beautiful, though in subtle ways. I still don't know. You know, I consider myself somewhat schooled in the lore of Batman. I read some of the comics when I was a kid, but I'd love to know what this series fixation is on chemicals. Is there some anti-chemical message here, or is it just a convenient plot device? If you know, put it in the comments. I mean, I understand how it fits into this movie, but I'd love to know why it's such a plot device overall. Get to the news. Yeah, that picture's creepy. The models with the Joker face. Becky here is played by Kit Hollenbach, who's a comedian. You can see a little bit of it here when she starts laughing herself to death. This whole scene is creepy. You know, the models, the reporter, the commercials. Ugh. It's very true to the spirit of Joker, I think. It's a very cartoony fall. I really think this commercial here where he's selling the Smilex is really what fueled a lot of the designs for the character in the animated series. Love that Joker. See, you could see this on the animated series. It's very Burton-esque, though. It's very surreal. Now, see, she's the only one who wears the mouth application besides Jack Nicholson. Everybody else, when they get killed with the Smilex, they're just kind of grinning. But yeah, she actually has the actual rictus grin. Again, love that Joker. And apparently Bruce didn't use all of this stuff that the Smilex was in. Now, you'll notice here, when Alfred gives him the file, the picture there on the left is the young Jack Napier. It's his mugshot. It's a photograph of the same actor who played young Jack in the flashback scene later. I'm told they brought him back in just for this photo. He's a British actor by the name of Hugo Blick, who looks a lot like Jack Nicholson. Note that he says his aptitudes are chemistry and art. Both come into play, of course. Okay, if you look at the headline here, it says that he's killed 13. The Joker has killed 13 people. Now, I've only accounted for 5. The guy in the photograph that looked like Bill Paxton, the 2 models, Becky the reporter, and the guy in the commercial. Gotham shopping nightmare. The only thing that would make this even creepier is if you started this on Black Friday. I would love to know if this was a commentary on Ed Koch. I know I said that before, but it's like, what are they trying to say here? This painting of Bruce's father on the wall there, that's a painting of David Bax, the actor who played him in the flashback. Think about this. Here we are, an hour into this movie, and the last time we saw Batman was in the chemical factory at the beginning. That was half an hour ago. That's a long time to go without Batman. It takes some time actually to figure out what's going on with Alicia. He explains it later, and it's really creepy. Now, the museum here is called the Flugelheim. Obviously a parody of the Guggenheim. The Nostalgia Critic pointed out that this was one letter off. Not quite. Flugelheim, Guggenheim. Now, when Vicky goes upstairs, you'll notice two famous paintings. One of them is the Blue Boy, and the other is Gilbert Stuart's painting of George Washington. And I said something about callbacks. You know, there are a lot of callbacks in this movie, and that reference to the $1 bill. Of course, the Gilbert Stuart painting is on our $1 bill, and it's a callback to something that happens later. She doesn't have her nails done. In Tim Burton's commentary on the DVD, he pointed out that he's the one that wrote Urgent. I can only hope that's not his real handwriting. Joker has an amazing sense of timing. What color is that? I'm colorblind, but what color is that smoke? Is that purple or is that just dark green? Right here, coming up, is my favorite, my absolute favorite line from this movie. Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds. You just have to say that every time you go into a museum. This is a really fun scene, despite what they're doing. Despite the fact that what they're doing is, despite what they're doing is despicable. I love this song too. This is the first time we've heard Prince in this movie. He was a big part of the. There were two soundtracks. His was one of them. Joker was here. Prince got his own soundtrack for this movie, and then of course there was the one with the score. I love this song. Now the guy puts his handprints on this painting, and then the next shot you notice the handprints are gone. A little continuity error there. I notice when he goes upstairs, you'll notice when he sees the Blue Boy, he kind of minces around. I guess alluding to the idea that maybe he thinks the Blue Boy is gay. I don't know. Then of course he points out the $1 bill. Now the one that he spares is Figure with Meat by Francis Bacon. I've made it a habit of every time I see a painting or a book in a movie, I try to equate it to whatever's going on in the movie. The painting is of an insane man seated between two hanging carcasses of cow carcasses. Make of that what you will. Now, I'm going to be honest, I gush over this scene. To my mind, it's one of the greatest in movie history. I mean, it's right up there. I love it when he looks at her pictures. Crap, crap, crap. And that disgusted look she gives him. And then we get back to the Corto Maltese. I tried to find out if the I do a lot of research for these things. I tried to find out if the Joker had something to do with the Cordo Maltese in the comics. Something I heard years ago. I could be wrong. Correct me, but I heard something about Joker got a congressman to order a nuclear strike or something. I don't know if that's true, but let me know in the comments. I make art till someone dies. The world's first fully functioning homicidal artist. My face on the $1 bill. This goes all the way through. He's just great here. I mean, this is beyond Oscars for me. I'm not saying that he would have won, but I think just an acknowledgement might have been nice. Maybe they didn't take it seriously enough. Now this, I really initially had a problem with, because I thought, this is really too dark. This whole thing with Alicia. When he disfigures her face. Of course, she later kills herself. But, you know, after having seen the animated series and then The Dark Knight, it makes me realize that this kind of fits. This is really what the Joker would do. You can imagine he would have possibly done this to Harley Quinn, maybe. I mean, he just mangles her face. He's playing all the notes here that I remember from The Killing Joke. And that's just the perfect note to play it on, because he's moved away from Cesar Romero. I thought it was a Pisces. Now you'll notice when he shoots the water out of the posy, or the acid out of the posy, it makes smoke, but it doesn't exactly burn the wall. Now this is another one that was in all the trailers. When she throws water on his face. Now he looks like Heath Ledger. And 45 minutes into the movie, and God knows how long, how much time was story time, we finally get back to Batman. About freaking time. Yeah, that rope trick was in all the trailers too. This line, where does he get all those wonderful toys? If I remember correctly, I could be wrong, but I think in the novelization, he actually turns to his henchman and says, well, don't just stand there, go ask him. And finally here we get the Batmobile. This is a movie that's very slow to reveal a lot of this stuff. I like that about it. You know, in Schumacher's film, we got all of this stuff, the car, the outfit, and everything. We got all of that in the first 2 or 3 minutes. Burton's really patient to show us this stuff. And of course, in any 80s movies, garbage cans are not used for garbage collection. They're used for being run over. Just like fruit stands. They can't be driving over 40 miles an hour here. Here he goes up to the Monarch Theater where he was before. Actually, the hotel, rather. There's the Monarch Theater. This is like the Blues Brothers. Now, I have a confession. I was sort of inspired to do this commentary a few months ago when Michael Keaton got an Oscar nomination for Birdman. And it's such a wonderful performance that I don't think safe to say would have been possible without Batman. Michael Keaton has had an odd career. I mean, he started as a comedian and, in Night Shift and Mr. Mom and Beetlejuice. And then he got serious and got a lot of acclaim for playing a year before this, for playing a drug addict in a movie called Clean and Sober, which is really, really good. I think it's just as good as Birdman. And then came Batman, and after that he kind of faded into the background. I mean, he was around, you'd see him here and there, and occasionally he'd come out with some comedy that flopped over and died, like Speechless or Jack Frost, or Multiplicity. But his career never really had the kind of zest that it had before Batman. I mean, the movie he made right after this, I think he was trying to change his image again. He played a psychotic in a movie called Pacific Heights. He was Carter Hayes in that movie. He was a tenant in the San Francisco apartment building owned by Matthew Modine and Melanie Griffith. But it was just his career was just never the same again, at least until Birdman. I say that lamentably, but I've heard Keaton in interviews, and apparently it doesn't bother him that much. He's a really good, I think, very underrated actor. I remember he was in Jackie Brown, but he wasn't in it enough. I thought Tarantino would bring him back. Now, these flashes that are happening here while he's fighting the goons, of course, they're coming from Vicky Vale's camera. But Burton liked them so much that he put them at the beginning of the movie, in the scene with where he's fighting the two goons. Where here it makes sense, and there it doesn't make sense. This guy swinging the sword was obviously apparently, I should say, a real swordsman. Of course, I don't know where the sparks are coming from, but he's professional, but not all that smart. I love this with Bob the Goon. But Bob just runs away. It's like, Bob may be a goon, but he's not stupid. Now here he calls for the Batmobile, and it's supposed to be empty, but if you look in the front windshield here in a second, you'll see the driver's hand. This came about because when they were putting together the VHS edition of this movie, they lightened it up because people had complained that the movie was too dark. And it was. I mean, even in scenes, there's the hand. And even in scenes in broad daylight, the movie was really dark. And if you watch carefully, when the car stops in front of Batman, it's a mannequin, because you'll see him sway. There it is. It goes by really quick, but you have to be looking to see it. That's a very Burton-esque forest. The car is not going very fast there. Batman doesn't talk. Except when he needs to. You'll notice that a lot of these scenes are sped up. A lot of people really fell in love with his Batmobile. But I guess when I look at the Batmobile, I'm looking for form and function. I like the form, but the function here it's so bad that whenever he turns a corner, he has to have a grappling hook to do so, as he did earlier. I love this thing with the light. Nope. Now here's where I'm gonna, I don't mean to nitpick, but I don't really understand why he's taking her here. He's bringing her to the Batcave, but I'm not really sure I understand why. And why doesn't he tell her when she gets out that there's a 100-foot drop there? See, I like the Batmobile, but I prefer the Tumbler actually. And I do like how he explains the bats, the great survivors. Now, if I remember correctly in the book, I think that bat that's in the cage there was wounded. It had a broken wing. He was kind of nursing it back to health. See, the only reason he's taking her to the Batcave is to give her information about the Smilex problem. But the common sense center of my brain just says, why didn't he just send it to her, to the newspaper, or send it to her house? And just like Spider-Man, I have the same issue with the voice. I mean, she spent the night with him, and she doesn't recognize his voice. Yeah, I know, suspension of disbelief. I like the idea that the Smilex problem is not one simple thing. It's a combination of things. It's certain products used in conjunction. It's hairspray can used with mouthwash, lipstick used with deodorant, that kind of thing. I like that it's not just simply poisoning things. Otherwise, he could find a solution right away. The things that are on his console there, I don't know why, but I didn't put it together initially over why he has mouthwash on his console. But then it hit me later, and it should have hit me right away, that this was Alfred Let's Go Shopping. This is trying to figure out the problem. And of course she's a woman, so she has to have a teddy bear on her bed. I noticed her feet are dirty. And he took the film. She wakes up the next morning, finds out that he took the roll of film, but you still have to wonder why he brought her all the way to the Batcave to do that. They drop off the Gotham Globe. It's always interesting nowadays to look back and you wonder how people would have solved this how people solved this problem without the internet. How did we survive without the internet? Now there's a running joke here. This is the second time he's busted a TV. Joker busts a TV every time Batman frustrates him. And it's leading up to a punchline involving Bob. Bob is played by a wonderful actor by the name of Tracy Walter. He was in a lot of Jonathan Demme pictures. He was in Silence of the Lambs. I think he was one of the morticians. Sometimes when a body comes out of the water, there's like leaves and things. And we get back to the Batcave here. I love that he's used the Bat computer. The Bat computer is a nice Deus Ex Machina in the Batman world. Okay, so here's the scene in Vicky Vale's apartment. And coming up is the one moment in the entire movie when Michael Keaton breaks away from being Bruce Wayne and sounds like Michael Keaton, the Michael Keaton that we know. It doesn't happen until Joker shows up, but you'll know the one I mean. It's the Let's Get Nuts scene. I'm wondering if this phrase, lots of space, was a thing in the 80s. Because I also heard it in Ghostbusters when Peter goes to Dana's apartment. And that is a big apartment. I mean, does a reporter really make that much? A photojournalist, rather. This doesn't look like a place that you live. It looks like a hotel room. This scene just frustrates me. It's I hate this kind of dance of misinformation. He wants to tell her that he's Batman, but it's this kind of sitcom fumble. I mean, there are better ways to tell her this, and there are certainly better ways than how she finds out, which I'll get to later. But this reminds me of the scene in Mr. Mom where he's trying to get Kenny to give up his whoopee. I mean, it's if you do compare the two scenes, it's that same kind of delivery. Nowadays, she would have thought he was trying to tell her he was gay. I think my problem with this stems from the fact that there's no real reason for it. You know, Superman doesn't show the big ass. Batman doesn't show her the uniform. You know, Bruce doesn't show her the uniform. That's just, oh, this is frustrating. I remember the audience in the theater when I saw this for the first time were laughing at this scene, and I'm thinking, no, this is not Batman. He's trying to slip back into his comedy routine, but this is not a comedy role, you know. And they especially laughed at this when he says, "I'm Batman." I know. Shut up and enjoy the movie. Now, Joker repeats what Bruce said a minute ago. Lots of space, but he's looking at her. You know, I'd like to think that as ingenious as Bruce is, he would have brought one of his Batman devices with him. I mean, he always seems to have them handy in a pinch, and I think this is the first time I've ever seen him caught off guard like this. See, and this is the finale of the Alicia subplot. You can easily have seen this as this being Joker and Harley, because easily I think he would have done the same thing to her. Of course, she was as crazy as a bedbug. Or the rooster in a hen house. I just noticed Vicky has a Padawan braid. N'est-ce pas, I think is French for, is it not? And this is really the only time that Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson get to share a scene face to face, so to speak, without all the masks. Okay, and we're coming up on the Let's Get Nuts scene, and I hate this. I know I'm griping, but when he does this, he suddenly, for a second, sounds like Beetlejuice. Why does he throw the pieces of Alicia's mask in the fire? He signals to Vicky to get out of the way. Because I'm going to break your stuff. He made mistakes. Oh, the Let's Get Nuts. Sounded for a second like Beetlejuice. You notice Joker, when he has a gun, either it's really small or it's really large. cover up another man's rhubarb. There's some one-liners in this movie that only he could do right. See, and then he leaves. He walks out of her apartment. Which leads me to wonder, why did he come here in the first place? Did he come here to kidnap her? Well, she's all dressed up for just being around the house. Nicholson's having a great time in this role. I think he dropped his hat. And they never tell you where Bruce went. They never... Did he go out the window? What? And why would you ever open another box left by the Joker? And again with the comedy feint. Okay, a little bit of history. I am not the biggest comic book fan in the world. I passed by comic books when I was a kid, but I didn't immerse myself in them. My time before I was 12 or 13 was spent in the splendor of Star Wars. Yeah, I came out of that generation. And so comic books came a little later. I read quite a bit when I was in junior high and high school, up until I got a girlfriend, and that put an end to that. I read Batman in the 90s, around the time of a story arc called A Death in the Family. And that was the one where Jason Todd is murdered by the Joker. And when I say murdered, I mean murdered. He was blown up in a building. And readers had an 800 number where they could call and they could decide whether or not the kid lived or died. Guess which one I picked? I decided his fate. But even though I'm not an expert, I know enough. And what really bothers me is this scene right here where he takes her into the... This scene coming up, rather, where she's led into the Batcave. You know, he's been wanting to tell her, but for me and what little I know about Batman, this is a false note. I mean, it's just a mistake. I know he's protective. I know Alfred is protective of Bruce, and he wants him to give up Batman and settle down and all that. But that just seems like an extreme note. So for me, I mean, it just rings false. Because it serves no real purpose. And here the Joker's trying to create mass hysteria again. He couldn't get it with a Smilex, so he's trying to get it by promising to dump money on the crowd. Then he'll drop the Smilex. Again, you might not believe this from any other movie criminal, but you know, to go on television and announce they're going to appear in public after several murders and creating a public health crisis. But from the Joker, you kind of expect that. I like this scene where he wipes the other screen off. It's implausible, but it's funny nonetheless. What I really don't understand is why they didn't stop him during the parade. I mean, he's obviously a wanted man. He's an accused murderer who went on television and all but confessed to his crime. Why didn't they just try and arrest him there? And there are enough thugs and drug addicts, and there he is wiping the screen. Enough thugs and drug addicts in this city that they'll show up to get the $20 million. He looks like a duck in this scene. Actually, you haven't taken off the makeup, you've put it on. I just noticed he's wearing blue jeans. See, now we go into the flashback scene. And this is where Bruce looks back at his parents' murder. And one of the things I really like about this movie, I know I've been griping a lot, but one of the things I really like about this movie is that this movie doesn't lean on this. The origins of his motivation are there, but the movie isn't really about this. And I think that's unusual for DC, because in the DCU, the elements of the origin of their characters are more central to their stories than, say the characters in Marvel Comics. Here it's touched on, but it's not essential. And also, this is different than it was in the Batman Begins, rather, because in Batman Begins they had gone to see an opera. Here they've gone to see a movie called Footlight Frenzy. But I like this flashback, but they've changed it a bit. Now it upsets Batman loyalists, but for me, I think it's okay because it fits with what Burton wanted to do. In that they change the identity of the killer. They come out of the shadows. Now a lot of these images, whoops, excuse me, hit my microphone. A lot of these images come directly from The Dark Knight Returns, rather. And the pearls, the popcorn, the gun, all of that, they're images that come directly from that. So I was excited to see this for the first time. And this actor comes back, Hugo Blick, who plays the young Jack Napier. See, here he's carrying a big gun. And he looks so much like a young Nicholson. See, in the comics, the thug who killed the Waynes was actually Joe Chill. But like I say, it's changed here to Jack Napier because it fits what Burton wanted to do. I think it would have been a little more challenging if it wasn't him. And by the way, there's a continuity error because when he stopped when he paused the video before, Joker had his eyes closed. But it fits what Burton wanted to do. I think it would have been more challenging if it had been Joe Chill, because he had to stop Joker for a similar crime, not just necessarily getting revenge on him for killing his parents. Okay, here's that unfortunate scene. Batman loyalists hate it, and boy do I agree. There's no reason for this scene. Number one, Alfred would have been fired for bringing her into the Batcave. It's not his secret to tell. Number two, her reaction to learning about his secret identity is non-existent. She just reacts, like she's got a rash or something. And number three, there's no good, solid reason why she should have been brought in here. This makes no sense. Doesn't have to be a perfect world. And she turns around and it's got this shot that looks like a soap opera. And the dialogue is all perfunctory. It feels written. It doesn't. This doesn't sound like the way people talk. It's that awkward, clunky dialogue that I hate. Yep. See the emblem? See the feet on the emblem? That shot of Batman was in all of the McDonald's commercials. Makes me want a Big Mac. Okay, so after that we get a raid on the factory. And maybe some part of them knew that the previous scene was a mistake, so they were like, hey, Batmobile. Well, I mean, I can see that even after that aggravation, I have to admit that this is a pretty cool scene. I won't even question how this factory has such wide lanes the Batmobile can drive through. And he drops this ball. Why don't they just move? That's pretty cool when it's going out of the factories, it's blowing up. That's really cool. After the worst scene in the movie comes one of the best, and that one's right here. Where he's blowing up the Smilex factory. Of course, you wonder why he didn't blow up the Smilex factory earlier, but okay. Two things to note. When he turns around here in the spotlight, his belt drops. Right there. And the other thing to notice, and this is just an interesting little note. That helicopter looks like a model. Joker called him Birdman. Think about that. Okay, so here's that big parade scene, and what you notice first of all is Prince. He was a big part of this movie. He wrote a lot of the songs for it. So far in the movie, we've only heard two. One was Party Man, which was at the museum, and the other is the song we're hearing now, which is Trust. Unfortunately, the best song was called Dance with the Devil, which I heard once or twice after this movie came out. But it sort of disappeared. It was pulled from the soundtrack for being too dark. I think it was replaced by Bad Dance. And it really is the best song in the movie, but unfortunately you kind of have to delve into bootleg circles to hear it. Now, one question that's always been sort of paramount here is where Joker acquired all this money. Well, in the novelization and in early storyboards, there is a close-up of the money, and it has Jack's face on it. It has Joker's face on it. For some reason, that shot was cut out, and I'm not sure why exactly. I mean, it would explain where he got it. And it also goes into, or it also was the punchline on that joke earlier when he said, you saw the Gilbert Stuart painting of the unfinished painting of George Washington. And then Joker said, on my face on the $1 bill. And then you get to this. This would have been a great punchline, but unfortunately we don't get to see the money. Maybe someday there'll be a director's cut. This will make more sense. Okay, as I mentioned before, this movie came out in the summer of 1989, and it was the biggest thing in the world. Added to that, it was in the middle of one of the best summer movie seasons ever. I mean, ever. I mean, that was a summer that, Batman, not only did Batman come out, but also Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Lethal Weapon 2, License to Kill, Dead Poet Society, Do the Right Thing, When Harry Met Sally, Parenthood, The Abyss. I mean, this wasn't just a good summer. This was probably the best summer ever. My own personal history with this movie around the time was kind of frustrating. When I was 17 when this movie came out, and the day that Batman opened, I had minor surgery on my foot, which meant that all of my friends got to see this movie before me. And the following week I couldn't see it because I went to spend a month with my relatives in Arkansas, and the only theater they had that was showing Batman was in a part of town that, let's just say, a nice middle-class white kid from the suburbs was best to stay away from. Not to down anybody's neighborhood, but... So I went to a Sabre theater that was showing everything else but Batman. So all the movies that I listed above I saw instead of Batman. Added to that was the fact that every single place you went, there was some form of Batman merchandise staring me in the face. So if I went to any kind of store or restaurant, there was something Batman there. So it was just like it was needling at me. Everybody else in the world had seen Batman except me. So when I got back home, which was in late July, the last week in July, in fact, I went to the theater to see it, only to be told that there was a problem with the projector. So I was going to go back the next day. My best friend said he wanted me to wait for him, so I ended up seeing Batman around the second week in August. Now, this doesn't sound like a problem except for one thing. If you were around at that time, then you know that we didn't have pretty HD prints. We didn't have HD. Everything was still shot on celluloid and shown through an analog projector. What this meant was that if you waited several weeks to see something, then you ran the risk that when you saw it, the film, after being shown 5 or 6 times a day for several weeks, would look like someone had drug it up and down a concrete driveway. So you got not only the movie, but you had to watch the movie through a bunch of scratches and pops and cuts and everything else. And that's how it looked when I saw Batman for the first time. So for years, I made sure that I saw the big tentpole movies on opening night. And even today when we don't have movies on celluloid, I still see movies on opening night. I think it's largely psychologically because of this, because of what happened with Batman. Of course, today I have to write reviews for my website, so I see them on the first weekend anyway. But anyway, that's just a little part of my history. Like you care. Well, while I've been getting personal, Joker's been trying to kill the crowds with Smilex. And Vicky and Knox are trying to get away. And I'm wondering why some people were hit by the gas and others weren't. Why didn't Knox get hit by it? I mean, I'm glad he didn't, but... Is that chicken feathers? Yeah, that's chicken feathers. I mean, I'm glad she went to check on it, but... I like the Batman just happens to have these giant clippers on the front of his plane. That's very Adam West. This plane doesn't turn very well. Now, he lets the balloons go, but when they go into the atmosphere, isn't the gas going to fall back down on the city? I like that he uses this guy as a footstool. Batman looks puzzled. Or Joker looks puzzled. Now, I mentioned the running gag with the TV sets earlier, that every time Batman foils the Joker destroys a TV set. Right now he doesn't have a TV set, so he shoots Bob. And I don't think a bullet or smoke came out of that gun. Why did he kill Bob? Bob is like the most loyal guy in his mob. This scene where he pops up in front of the moon was on the soundtrack to the score. There were 2 soundtracks for this, one with the score and one with Prince's songs. I had both. Excuse me. I had both. I just love Danny Elfman's score. Elfman's become to Tim Burton what John Williams is to Spielberg. That's a great image of him in front of the 200. But see, I don't get this. He fires all these missiles and bullets and everything, and they miss him. He's got a targeting computer from an X-Wing. He hits the goons, though. See, he misses with all those bullets and missiles and rockets and everything, and yet Joker takes his plane out with one bullet. I don't get this. I don't know if you've noticed this, but Batman's gadgets aren't quite as up to speed as they should be. I mean, the Batmobile needs a grappling hook to make a hairpin turn, and the plane can be taken down by one bullet. You know, Batman's known for being state-of-the-art, but that's kind of... And if you notice, when he crashed, the cars that were on the side of the road looked like toy cars. And Batman just disappeared. That's kind of odd. Where exactly did he go? I mean, he left so this could happen, but... Gotta get you to the church on time. Transport for 2. Now, Joker says, make it 10 minutes. The Nostalgia Critic actually pointed out, this does actually take 10 minutes in real time. From the time he says that till the time the helicopter shows up. Did he crawl out from under the plane? How did he get out? I don't get that. This scene is somewhat reminiscent of Vertigo. You know, the stairs are the same, the dizziness is the same. At least, I'll say this, at least there's some fallibility to Batman. Because you notice he's been in a plane crash and he's stumbling around here. While Joker's going upstairs. He falls on the pews. But you have to wonder why Batman didn't simply just use a grappling hook, you know, to get up to the belfry. Again, there is a fallibility in his not only in his gadgets, but in his thinking, I think. Now, when he drops the shoe, you'll notice it goes right down the middle. But it lands on the landing. I love this belfry. It's almost like something out of a fairy tale. And of course, naturally, in all these movies, the cops show up late. He knocked the nose off. He knocked the front nose off of his plane. Love the production design of this. It's like I said, it's like out of a fairy tale or something. This huge cathedral and these bells and everything, and then this gothic character running around. It's nice to know the Posey is practical. I get some sense that Batman is afraid of, or Bruce is afraid of heights. I don't know why. Could have at least taken her shoe back to her. Commissioner Gordon looks like a politician here, rather than a police official. Or the cartoon spotlight. Cinematography here is good too. It's really very dark. It's getting away from the pop day-glow colors of the TV series, I think. Shall we dance? That's another, when he whips around there, that's another image that was used in the commercials. And this thing where he fights all of the goons, all of Joker's goons, it's a classic video game approach. It's like you have to fight all of you have to fight all the bad guys to get to the boss. The symbolism is there. It's interesting. I love this belfry. The symbolism, it's Beauty and the Beast. Of course, he makes a reference to that in a second. And I could complain about the tragedy of the climbing killer. That cliche where the killer traps themselves at the top. And again, if it were anybody but the Joker, I might have reason to complain. Joker's goons get points for loyalty, but unfortunately not for brains. The scene in the balcony has a very gothic horror feel to it. It's like the old Frankenstein pictures or the movies by James Whale. The monster trapped in his lair. Hunchback of Notre Dame is another inspiration here. And you might think his quips would get tiresome at this point, but they don't. Even when he's about to fall to his death. Hunchback of Notre Dame is another inspiration here, but even with those inspirations, this is a very Burton-esque scene. It reminds me a lot of the end of Edward Scissorhands. Again, the video game thing. He has to fight all the goons, then he has to fight the biggest goon, and then he gets to the boss. Ow. Hits the guy's head on the bell. And the guy falls to his death. I think it was wise that he called somebody to come and pick him up with a helicopter, because if he were just doing this, it wouldn't make any sense. Beauty and the Beast. Of course, if anyone else calls you Beast, I'll rip out his lungs. Now, this scene coming up is just plain creepy. Not on his part, but on hers. Well, she notices Batman, but then she starts doing this. Every time she thinks, she bites her lip. This feels a little off. When she comes on to him, notice he stops. This, I don't... I have yet to figure this one out. It looks like she's going down on him. Here's another reason I like this setting. You know, church is a place for reflection and confessing your sins, and here Batman and Joker meet, and there's a reflection that these guys are two sides of the same coin. This is Jack Nicholson at his nuttiest. But you can see this Joker, even in his zeal, realizes there's a possibility that Batman could kill him. There's a feeling here in their dialogue or in their exchanges here that they're two sides of the same coin. And they always have been. It's like Batman is like, I mean, they're just complete opposites. And there's a weird thing that goes on here, and I think it darkens the Batman legend, is that he's not killing the Joker because he has to. He's going to kill the Joker out of revenge. That's a very dark message. And we get to the point where he's on the ledge. What are you laughing at? See, you would think that by this point in the movie that the jokes here would get old. You know, his little quips here would get old, but they're not. Even here, I'll lend you a hand. You know? But why would she take it? It's just like the box. Why would she open the box? Why would she take his hand? See, and there, even the Joker realizes there's a possibility that he could fall. I mean, even as crazy as he is. Here comes the helicopter. His goons have fake teeth. He lost his hat. And it's interesting that Batman would allow him to fall to his death. He hasn't fallen to his death yet here, but I think in another incarnation he would rescue him and send him to Arkham. That might have been interesting. But you get the feeling that this Joker is smart enough that he would never been taken to Arkham. Or that he would have been there for half a day and probably broken out. But see, I like the idea that Batman would allow someone to die. He actually is not allowing him to die. He actually killed him. You know, he knew what would happen. And the Joker falls to his death. And they nearly fall to theirs. Yeah, he lets Joker die, but as we've seen in this, as we've seen in this movie, this Batman in this version is not interested in saving anyone, especially the Joker. But yeah, I mean, he does save Vicky, of course, and I mean, it's right there in the beginning when those two guys rob those people, rob that couple and their son. Batman doesn't save them, doesn't stop the crime. He just he doesn't stop the crime. He just catches them afterwards. Doesn't even give the people their money back. this laugh box that's in his pocket, that's in Joker's pocket here. My friend has that ringtone. It's unsettling. I can imagine what it's like when you hear it at night. Now, would you reach in the Joker's pocket? I mean, I know he's dead, but would you reach in his pocket? Not without a bomb disposal suit. See, I like the relationship between Knox and Vicky Vale. As I say, I think it's much more genuine than Vicky and Bruce. And in every scene, no matter what she's doing, her hair is always perfect. I like Robert Wall. I don't think he got enough credit for this. He's going to introduce the bat signal here. I don't think any of the 3 Batman movies that followed this were at this level. I didn't like any of those 3, but as many problems as I had with this one, I think of the first 4, this is the best one. This is the best one until Batman Begins. Oh, that's such a fake-looking signal. Ugh. Now here's something to note. When I do these commentaries, I spend upwards of a week looking at the film and taking notes and things before I turn on the microphone and start talking. When I did my commentary for Spider-Man, I found that it was less the film that I had initially thought. I liked it less than I did when I saw it in the theater. With Batman, it's just the opposite, as much as I've been complaining. I had kind of dismissed this film, especially in light of the Christopher Nolan films, but seeing it again, I appreciate it a lot more. There are things that I like about it, and a few things that I don't. But I can't deny that after 25 years, this is still a very good movie, flawed though it may be. And like I say, I have probably just as many good things to say about it as I do bad things. It's about 50-50 with me, but I think it's a very, very good movie. And one final nitpick: why is he standing here? You would imagine Bruce would be hiding behind a gargoyle or something, but now again, a nitpick. Now I should tell you, as we go into closing credits, I should tell you that I have no plans to do a commentary on the 3 films that followed this one, unless you really want to hear 2 hours of groaning and wailing. So I'll do just a brief summation. Batman Returns broke my heart. They seemed to give creative control over to Tim Burton with that one, and the result was that he made a Tim Burton movie, not a Batman movie. And I mentioned before how much trouble I had getting to see this first Batman movie, so you better know I was first in line on the first day to see the sequel. What I saw was dreary and joyless. I mean, I like Michelle Pfeiffer, but the movie was just a mess. It was like it was just like a weird nightmare. Batman Forever was a Jim Carrey movie. Batman Returns was such a dud that they took the directing reins away from Tim Burton and gave them to Joel Schumacher. And the result was, as I said, a vehicle for Jim Carrey, who was at the time the most popular star in the world, so I guess you can't blame him for that. But the movie was jokey and campy and silly and overcooked, and really I hated every minute of it. Batman and Robin is the only one that I skipped in theaters, but I've seen it twice, once on DVD and the other on Riff Tracks. And what it boils down to, I think, that movie is a movie made by a room full of studio executives in their 60s who wanted to remake the TV show without really taking into account that Batman had moved past that he had changed because of this movie and the animated series and the comics. But I'm happy for it, because without its failure, Warner Brothers wouldn't have shelved the series, and we would have gotten Batman triumphant. with Martin Short as the Mad Hatter and Madonna as Harley Quinn, who, by the way, would have been cast as Joker's daughter. For those reasons and more, I'm glad it never happened. Plus, they would have shelved the series, and they wouldn't have shelved the series, we might not have gotten Batman Begins. So it's all for the best. Well, that's Tim Burton's Batman, and I have enjoyed talking about it. I hope you've enjoyed listening to me go on and on about it. Join me next time when I will take a step down in class, and I will talk about Amityville 3D. Until then, I'm the Armchair Critic, reminding you, please don't keep the commentary to yourself. See ya!